Music theory with OneNote, traveling over an octave, scale degree intervals terminology versus modal distance terminology, the face-off of the century, more scary than facing off against Nancy Pelosi, which is particularly scary if she interprets the term face-off as removing her makeup. No telling what's under there. Anyways, this isn't that scary, but still, get ready and some coffee, because although we're just playing with one note, it's a beautiful note. You're not required to, but if you have access to it and would like to follow along, we're currently in the OneNote file of Modal Node System, MNS Presentation 1246, OneNote over an octave, scale degree intervals versus modal distance. We have our list of presentations, which we plan on adding plenty more to shortly. Also noting in this OneNote presentation, we could spend all of our time on the music theory side of things, but we also have a similarly numbered and named presentation where we build these tables using Excel, practicing our Excel skills, our music skills, as well as our table visualization skills in general. This time we're continuing our discussion of intervals and modal distances, a crucial term to better understand and navigate the fretboard. First focusing in on our objective, that being to better understand and to navigate the fretboard, having the best visualization of the fretboard as like the globe. It's a map of the territory. It is the territory, and like the globe, it has 7 destination locations like the continents on it, and it has 5 non-destination locations like the oceans, which we pass through to get to the destination locations. Our head is above this low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling in space above the fretboard. And we notice that the fretboard actually spins around. It has degrees of rotation like the planet. We're going to give it 12 degrees of rotation, naming them after the musical alphabet, picking typically the 4th degree of rotation, which we're going to be calling the collection of notes related to the C major scale. Once we know that, then we're not going to name the notes or the continents by the note names, but rather by, see, that would be like having a different name for all of the continents for each position as it travels around in a circle. We don't need to do that once we've identified the position that we're viewing it from. Then I just want to name the 7 continents, which we could do with the Nashville number system, which is basically naming the nodes. The 1 is the I, the 4 is the Lydian or the Ionian, the Lydian, the 3 is the Phrygian, the 5 is the Mixolydian. Remembering also that this is done in the key of C for our practice purposes, but you could shift it forward to C sharp, to D sharp, and so on. The whole thing would shift forward. Therefore, all of the intervals that we are using work on all of the different 12 collections of notes, and within those, all of the modes that we are discussing. Now, in a map, we have to learn 2 different things to get a map, or how do I get from point A to B, from North America to Asia. I need to know directions, go left at the grocery store, go right at the gas station, and I need to know distance. But in our system over here, we're making it even easier. Everything's on a track. We're going around a track like a NASCAR or around the block. Therefore, all I really need to have is direction, clockwise, counterclockwise, forwards or backwards, as well as then the forwards or backwards and the distance, which we can measure either in modal half steps, continent to continent, which you could also do in scale degrees, which is an off by 1 term, same idea. Or you can have the continents and the oceans, which would be equivalent to the notes. So that's easier than a normal map. That means we have less things we have to do to list out how do you get from A to B. So any of the 7 points, I can just say directionally, clockwise, counterclockwise, and then distance in modal half steps or scale degrees, similar, or the notes distance. But we also have this idea that we could go around the block multiple times, or better visualization would be you can see things as either a note number line, which goes up and down infinitely. it repeats, as we can see, A repeats here after we go past 12, but it's an octave higher. So we can think of it as going higher as well as having a repetitive motion. So we can also visualize it in a circle where we kind of ignore the idea that the octaves are going higher and we still measure everything as though they're in the one octave. True visualization of it, if our human brains could understand it well, would be that it's a spiral going upward, like a spiral staircase kind of, right? This thing would be a 3D popping out. We'd have the locations would repeat, but they're not exactly the same. It would be like adding time dimension in it. It's the same location, but it's different because we traveled forward in time or something like that, right? But from a practical standpoint, we want to think of it as kind of a number line or as a circle typically. So we'd like then to have a naming convention so that when I go over an octave, I could still give me the flavor, which would be like the local distance, but also show that it's an octave higher to show that it is two different notes and that the octave is different. We go from this Mixolydian to the Ionian. It would be an XI modal range. It's going to have a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'd like to call it a 5-note away from the X or Mixolydian node, which would have 1, 2, 3, or the third modal half step away, which would be the fourth scale degree. From a scale degree terminology, then it would be a 5-note away perfect fourth. However, I'd also like to be able to measure to this one over here as well, which I would think would still be a perfect fourth, and it is, but it's going to be an octave up. Now remember, there's two ways that we're measuring this. One is by the number of notes. We said it was 5 notes away, and the second is either by modal half step or scale degree, the scale degree being the perfect fourth. But most people drop the number of notes. Therefore, we only have the scale degree to help determine if it's within the octave or an octave up. So in other words, if I count down, it's going to be 5, 10, 15, 16, 17. So it's now 17 notes away. 17 minus an octave, which is 12, would be like 7 minus 2, which would be 5 notes away, which would be a perfect fourth. But if I only have that one term of a fourth, how am I going to indicate that it's going to be an octave higher? I could continue to be counting around the loop, and so that instead of calling it a perfect fourth, I can say if this was the 1, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, but then I go around the circle again, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'd have to call it an 11th. Now, calling something an 11th is going to get confusing because most people might not recognize that, and you have to do a little math of subtracting out like 7 to get to the fourth, which isn't too bad, but it's not something often done in practice because I'd like to see every distance from a Mixolydian, particularly on the guitar, to an Ionian, to have the same interval name, even though that's the local interval name. So I'd rather do something like, say, let me add the notes, right? So if I add the notes, now I have 2 different measurement tools, and I can use the local distance as though I'm just going around the track and having the shortest distance from the Mixolydian to the Ionian, and I can give the distance in total distance. So if I add the note distance, it would be 5, 10, 15, 16, 17. Or it would be 5 plus an octave of a perfect fourth, or from the Mixolydian node, it would be 1, 2, I'd still call it a 1, 2, 3, third modal half step forward, which would be the fourth scale degree. So I'm going to keep the scale degree terminology or the modal distance terminology the same, and have the distance tell me whether I'm passing an octave or not. Now, in a future presentation, I'll do it the other way so that we can see the scale degrees going up or the modal distance going up as well. But I think functionally, this is the best way to do it, easiest way to see it. So let me show you what I mean here. We're going to say we have then our notes in our musical alphabet, 12 notes. We picked the key of C, 7 notes related to the major scale by going from the C, applying our formula, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, and that gives us our 7 notes, collection of notes around the key of C. So now we're going to be looking at our distances. We picked out our distances starting within 1 octave, going clockwise or to the right or increasing in pitch. And we named them in our conventional naming convention. And then we also named them, which in a convention I think would be better if we could start at scratch at this point in time, which would be to name a modal range distance and then to name the distance in notes as well as modal half steps instead of scale degrees being off by 1 from whatever node that we are on. So let's look at that concept now. If we go above 12 steps, so if I go above 12 steps, we've increased an octave. I would like to call that a 12 note away. I'm going to keep it as a perfect first. You might call it then a perfect 8th, right? Because that's what you would normally do if you removed the notes. You'd have to say that I've indicated that I've gone up an octave by saying it's a perfect first or a unison perfect first, perfect 8th. But I want to keep this second name in essence the same so that I get the idea of it and then use the notes. I can use that same concept over here. It makes more sense on the 13 because most people are more familiar if I go up 13 notes to still call it like a minor second and are less familiar to say it's an octave away or it's an 8th, like saying a perfect 8th or saying in this case it would be a minor 9th, right? They're less familiar with like a minor 9th terminology. I think it would be easier to say it's a 13 note away or a 1 note plus an octave, a 1 plus 12 note away. But let's start with this one. So if we go an octave up, so if I stayed on the Ionian to the Ionian, so if I was on the Ionian to the Ionian, that would be a 0 distance away. If I say it's an II modal range and 12, I'm saying we're not just going into the local distance, we're taking an extra lap around or going an octave up from a note number line perspective. So I can say, let's count it this way, 5, 10, 11, 12. So we have a 12 distance up, and that's one way I can name the modal range. It's still I to I on the map, Ionian to Ionian, but there's a 12 note distance, an added octave between it. I can also call that a 1-1 from a modal range standpoint, Ionian to Ionian, and 12, meaning there's 12 notes distance between them. So I could then name it with the equivalent to the interval name. It's going to be a 12 note away from the Ionian node, and then it's going to be a 0 modal half step, which would be the first scale degree. So similarly here for the notes, I'm saying let's keep the distance at 12, but the second number, instead of having that still increase past 6, it would be like 7 in this case, 7 steps away. I'd like to keep that within the local distance. I think that's just the easiest way to be able to do it. But I'll show you the other way as well, because that could allow you, and we'll do that in a future presentation, meaning we just keep on increasing the modal half steps, in which case you can kind of remove the note distance. But I think that's actually, although shorter to say and write, more difficult to understand. So I would always I recommend repeating the note name. All right, so let's, if I did that on a DD, then if we went to the Dorian, this is the same thing, of course, but now I'm just saying it would be on the Dorian. So here's a Dorian, and it would stand the same thing, but if I go up 12, it'd be 5, 10, 11, 12. So up to here, it's a DD and 12. It's, in other words, a Dorian to a Dorian modal range and 12 note distance between it. From a modal distance standpoint, it would be a 12 note away from the Dorian, which is still a 0th half step, which would be the first scale degree, right? It's because I'm still going to say it's still a Dorian. The second one says it's still a Dorian. I'm not going to say it's going up 7 steps. I'm going to say it's just on the same. So in other words, if I was here, if I was on this Dorian and I was going to this Dorian, then it would be how many modal half steps? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 modal half steps up. So I could say it's a 12 note away Dorian 7th modal half step, which would be equivalent to the 8th scale degree. But I'd rather keep that second term as though it's in the local distance, and that'll give me the flavor more easily. All right, let's do the next one and just check them out. If I was to do the same thing from the Phrygian, then let's see, that would be here. So I'm on the Phrygian, would be a PP, so it would be from a P to P and 12. So that means I'm going up 12. Let's go up 12 this way since we can do that here. And that would be then a PP and 12, which would be a 3, 3, and 12 modal range, which would be a 12 node away distance from the Phrygian node. And then it's going to be a zeroist modal half step for the local modal half step. So in other words, it's a 12 node distance from here to here from the Phrygian node, and it's a zeroist modal half step. And you say, well, wait, no, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modal half steps. Did I get that right? Yeah, 7, and it's 7 over here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modal half steps. And it's like, yeah, but I want to keep that second number within the current or the local range, because that's going to be easier to give the flavor, which will be easier to see when we get like into the minor second. I want to keep it as the second, which would be the first modal half step. All right, so that's going to be the idea. So let's go down to the next one. I won't go through all of them. Let's go down and say, I'm just going to pull these down here, and then I'll pull this down like this, and that's how we'll do these ones. So if we're on this one, so now we're going to say we're at 13. So we're taking 13 steps. So it would be a 13 minor second is what I would conventionally call it, keeping the distance at 13, but keeping the local interval as a minor second to give us the flavor. Right, but I would rather say let's do this from a minor mode first, because that will land us on a continent. Not just any minor will land us on the continent for a minor second. I'm going to have to be on like a Phrygian. So we'll be on the Phrygian. So if we're on the Phrygian, let's say we're going to do a PY and 12, which is going to be a 3, 4, and 12 modal range, which will be a 13 note away from the Phrygian node first modal half step, which will be the second scale degree. Okay, what are you talking about? Well, let's take a look at this Phrygian. If I go the local distance for a minor second, which would be the first modal half step away, I would be getting to here. But now we're going to be adding 12. So it's 13 notes away, which would be the local distance of 1 plus an octave, or the local distance of 1 plus 12, or 13 from the Phrygian. So I can say there's 5 notes between the string, 10, 11, 12, and then 13. So now we can see the difference between them, right? So all of these terms give us meaning. We're going to say it's 13 notes away, which I can clearly count from the Phrygian node. But then instead of saying the second term keeps on going around after I go around the circle from a note number line perspective, I'm going to imagine its local distance within the circle, within the lap, which is the first modal half step, which would be second from a scale degree. So in other words, first modal half step here, which would be, if that's the 1, 1, 2, second scale degree. And that's going to be helpful because this local distance is going to give us the flavor immediately, and it's possibly how guitarists are most likely to remember shapes as well. So that local distance, you just want to add to the local distance the number, the note distance, because that'll give you the added dimension we're missing. I could still call this a PY. This would be the local PY modal range, or 3/4 modal range. I'm going to call this a PY modal range and 12, a PY and 12, meaning there's an added lap included if you think about it from the track analogy. All right, let's do it the next one. If I was to go from, the second is not usually in, you're going to land in the ocean. So if I go from the Ionian, if I go a 13 note away from the Ionian node, it's going to be 0.5 local distance. So what does that mean? If I'm on the Ionian and I go 13 away, it's going to be 5, let's do it this way, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, lands me in the Ionian Ocean, right? Lands me in the Ionian Ocean. The local distance is 0.5 modal half steps away, which would be right here, right in the middle here, 0.5 modal half steps. So I'm giving me my two measurement terms. The first one gives me the total distance, which would be the local distance would be 12, or 13 minus 12 would be like 3 minus 2, which would be 1 node away, as you can see here. But I'd like to give it the total distance of 13, and then the second number is in the local distance, so that gives me kind of like the flavor. So that's going to be that one. So that's going to be then a modal range of an I, and this is why I put an and instead of a plus, because it's an I to an I plus. So it's an I to the Ionian Ocean, but it's not this Ionian Ocean, it's this Ionian Ocean, which again, if you add a time convention to your map, kind of gives you the idea of it. So we're in the same Ionian Ocean, but the ocean's never the same, man. Things change. The river is always changing. So we're in an I plus 12, right? There's a distance time dimension of 12 that got included, right? Which would be an I to it would be a 1 to a 1.5 and 12 modal range from a Nashville number system. A 1 to a 1.5 plus 12 distance between them. All right, let's try it again. So let's do the next one. Let's do this one more time on a. Let's do the Lydian. So if I was on the Lydian mode, let's pick a Lydian here, and we're going 13 notes away from it. So if I go 13 notes away, it would be 5, and then 10 up here because of the fault line, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's going to land me in the Lydian Ocean, right? Lands me in the Lydian Ocean. Now it's 13 notes away. 13 minus 12 would be a 1 note away distance. So it would be right here for the local distance from the Lydian mode, and it's 0.5 modal half steps away, which you would think would be 1.5 scale degrees, but we don't have 0.5s in the scale degrees, so it rounds to 2 scale degrees. So we're going to have, so this is going to be then a y plus and 12. This would be a y modal range, otherwise known as a 4 modal range. I'm sorry, this would be a y plus modal range, otherwise known as a 4 to a 4.5 modal range. But this one is going to be a y to a y plus and 12 modal range, meaning there's another added 12 notes in between there. All right, hopefully I got to, it's a little hard to keep, so let's try the next one. Or else I'm going to get worn out. Let's go down to the next one and see if I can explain that one better. So let's just move all this down at the same time. Look at that. That's a better way to do it. Okay, so now we're going to say we're going 14 notes away. So normally I would say that's 14 notes from whatever point we're naming, and we're just going to call that then a major second from the local distance. 14 minus 12, an octave, would be same as 4 minus 2, which would be a 2 note away, which would be a major second. So a major second is in the Ionian mode, so it'll land us on a continent. So I would like to say it's a 14 note away from the node we're talking about, Ionian node, let's start with. So from that node, we're going 14, distance of 14. So that would be like 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So it would be an ID modal range, but it's not just a local ID, which would be here to here. It's an ID plus 12 modal range, or an ID and 12 modal range. So I don't get the pluses messed up, which I think I messed up last time. Sorry about that. Or from a Nashville music system, it would be a 1, 2, and 12. The 1, 2 modal range and 12 distance in between them. So that would be a 14 distance, which would be, again, 14 minus 12 would be 2 plus an octave, or 2 plus 12 distance from the Ionian node, first modal half step. That's the local distance that I'm keeping local even when I go down to here, so that'll give me the flavor. So, and that would be the second scale degree if we were talking in scale degrees. All right, let's try this one. Let's try to apply that same thing to the Dorian. So if we go from the Dorian, once again, it's a 14 note away D first modal half step, which would be the second scale degree. but this time from the Dorian node. So if I go 14 up from the Dorian, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lands me on the Phrygian. So I would call that a DP modal range, but a DP modal range is usually right here for the local distance, which is 2 notes away or 1 modal half step forward. So this distance, I would like to call it a DP and 12, an added 12 distance within the range. Or from a Nashville number system, a 2, 3, and 12, a 2, 3, and 12, right? And so this is going to be 14. 14 minus 12 would be 4 minus 2 or 2, right? So that's going to be that. Let's try another one. I'm not going to go all the way through them, but you get the general idea on that one. Let's go down to the next one. So let's take all of this together. If I can grab it all. And just got to do this a little faster now. All right. So now we're on no, we're not on 16. We're on 15. So we have 15. So a 15 note away, local distance would be 15 minus 12, which would be 5 minus 2, which would be 3. So it'd be 3 would be a minor third typically. So let's look at one where a third will land. That would be on a minor mode like the Dorian. So I'd like to call it a 15 note away, not an M, right? But from the node we're on, the Dorian, and then the second modal half step, which would be the third scale degree. So if I was on a Dorian here, you go up 15, it would be 5, 10, and then 15 across the fault line right there. So we would call that a DY modal range. But a DY is normally going to be right here. So it would be 1, 2, 3 up, because it would be 15 minus 12, 5 minus 2, 5, 4, 3, 3 notes up. So I'd like to call this then a DY and 12 to go from here to here, which would be a 2, 4. So that would be a 2, 4, and 12 modal range. And then the distance is going to be a 15 note away from the Dorian node, which I'll give the local distance of 2 modal half steps, 1, 2 modal half steps, because that gives us the flavor, because we know that that's 1 less than the scale degree of a third. Now again, how do I know it's a minor third? Because the distance is 3 notes away. The local distance is 3 notes away. And I also know that because I'm going from the Dorian node. If I'm landing on a continent from a minor mode, that's how I should be able to identify those things. The fact that we're getting that information from this little m is not your optimal way to do it, right? Because that thing isn't really the thing that should be triggering whether it's minor. It should be the distance. It's a local distance of 3 notes away. That's the thing that you want to trigger the fact that it's a minor distance. It's in most of the minor modes as opposed to the major mode. Okay. So if I was on a major, let's just do one that would be it's going to land in the ocean. So if I go 15 up from the Ionian, then now it's a 1.5 landing me in the ocean modal half step. So if I was going from this Ionian, it's going to be 5, 10, and then 15 as I go across the fault line. So that lands me in the Dorian Ocean. The local area would be a distance of 15 minus 12, would be 5 minus 2 or 3 notes away. 1, 2, 3 lands me over here in the Dorian Ocean. So I would call that distance then an Ionian to a D plus or a P negative, right? And 12 if I'm going to this one. So I'd say it's an ID plus and 12, or a 1 to a D.5 and 12. 1 to a D.5 and 12, or a distance of 15 from the Ionian node, which would be a 1.5 modal half step, which would be, you would think, 2.5 scale degree, but we don't have 0.5 scale degrees, so we call it a third. All right, let's go down to the next one. You can go through each of these. Obviously, each of these here, I'm just going to do a couple of them, but all these are measuring from the different modes, and you can kind of compare then, when do you land on the continent and when do you land in the ocean, which is going to be that's what you want to kind of play with. All right, so then let's go to the next one and say we go 16. So now we're going 16 up. 16 minus 12 would be 6 minus 2, which would be a 4 note away, and that would be a major third typically. So we can go from the Ionian landing on a continent. So let's say we go 16 up from the Ionian. That would be an Ionian second modal half step. So if I say it's a second modal half step, I know the distance locally, right? I could say, okay, that's going to be 1, 2. If I know my shape and I can count it up, or that's going to go to the P, that would be an IP local distance, IP modal range. But I'm going up 16, so it would be 5, 10, and then across the fault line 15, and then 16. So here's an IP modal range and 12, or a 1, 3 modal range and 12, which would be 16, which would be 16 minus 12 would be at 4, a 4 plus an octave away, a 4 plus 12, or 16 away from the Ionian node second modal half step, which is the local distance. So I'm not counting all the modal half steps up to here, because it would be the local distance plus another 6 distances of it, because there's 6 steps to get to the 7 continents if you're starting on one of the continents. All right. I'm sorry, it would be 7. It would be plus 7, because if I went from continent to continent, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then so then if I kept going, we'd be going up. So I won't go into that. We'll talk more about that later. But the point is, I'm keeping this as the local distance. We'll talk about the other method in a future presentation. So let's do one that would not be landing on the continent. Let's pick a minor, and I could still measure from a minor. So if I went on the Dorian, from the Dorian node, let's say we're on this Dorian node, and we go 16 up. It would be a 16 up from the Dorian, which would be a 2.5 modal half step, which would land me in the ocean. So if I go 16 up, 5, 10, 15, 16 lands me in the Lydian Ocean. If I take the local distance, 16 minus 12, which is 4, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, lands me in the Lydian Ocean, which is 2.5 modal half steps up, 1, 2.5 modal half steps up. So I would call this distance a dy plus modal range. For the local modal range, this would be a dy plus and 12 distance. This could also be called a 2,4 modal range. I'm sorry, 2,4.5 modal range and 12 to get to this one, or a distance of 16 notes away from the Dorian node, but the local distance to give me the flavor of a 2.5. So, all right, so then we're going to say, let's go to the next one. I feel like I could do this better, but this is the best I got right now. It's going okay. It's going okay. Let's bring it down to the next one and be too critical on myself. I got, say we go 17. 17 has a local distance of 17 minus 12, which would be 7 minus 2, 7, 6, 5. 5 note away would be a perfect fourth. So if I measured a perfect fourth from the Lydian mode, 17 note away from the Ionian, which would be the third modal half step, because the fourth is typically off by 1, right? So we're going to say, all right, if I was on the Ionian, then it would be the local distance of the third modal half step. So that would be 1, 2, 3. It would be an IY modal range, but I want to go 17 notes up, not modal half steps, but notes now. So I'm going to go 5, 10, and then 15 across the fault line, 16, 17. So here, once again, is an IY modal range, but it's an IY plus 12, or a 1, 4, and 12 modal range, which is 17 notes away from the Ionian node to get here, but the local distance in modal half steps would be 3, 1, 2, 3, not including the oceans, because that third is 1 step away from the scale degree, which is the fourth, which is the thing that usually gives most people the flavor. All right, so then let's do that one is a perfect fourth, so it kind of works on most of them. So in other words, that interval is going to be in most of them. So let's just go down to the next one, because we're running long on time here. And I do have all day, but maybe you don't have all day. This is what I do all day long. Yeah, it's so I can do this all day. Okay, but maybe you don't have all day. And so try to respect your time. Now we're on an 18 note away. So the local distance would be 18 minus 12, which would be like 8 minus 2, 8, 7, 6. That would be a 6 note away. And we normally call that like the weird one, which is a diminished fifth or like an augmented fourth. So that one isn't going to fit in most of the modes. And I know that not because of it's diminished. I know that because it's 6 notes away. And I'm like, oh, that's the thing that triggers that it's weird. So it's basically going to be in the Locrian mode is the only one that it's going to kind of be in there, at least in the mode of the fifth. So let's say it was let's go to Locrian and say it's an 18 note away. And let's bring this over here. Just maybe we can touch in on some of these over here so we can work with these ones. So it's an 18 note away from a Locrian, crazy Locrian. Oh no, you're not dealing with Locrian. Yeah, we're going loco. All right, 18 notes away. So it's going to be 5, 10, and then crossing the fault line, 15, 16, 17, 18. So it's going to be an NY modal range, but it would typically have a local distance of 6, right, which would be 5 and 6. So this would be the local distance. And so I'm going to call it, that would be an NY, but this distance is going to be an NY and 12, right? Or a 7, 4 and 12, or a distance of 18 to get to here from the Locrian node, which would be the fourth modal half step, which would be the local distance, which you can see easier on one string, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be the local distance here in terms of modal half steps, which would be the fifth scale degree. All right, so then obviously on most of the other ones, it's going to fall like in the ocean. So let's not spend a whole lot of time on the funny one. We did the Locrian, so let's move on to the next one. Okay. All right, let's do the next one, 19 notes away. So the local distance would be 19 minus an octave of 12, which would be 9 minus 2, 9, 8, 7. 7 is usually a perfect fifth. So I'd say it's a 19 note away perfect fifth. That's going to be in the Ionian. So if I measure that distance away from the Ionian, I should land on a continent. So if I'm on this Ionian and I go 19 notes away, it would be 5, 10, and then 15 over here is 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We land here, so that's going to be an IX modal range. And then once again, the 19 minus 12 is 9 minus 2 or 7. So the local distance would be, if I measure on one string, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 away, or 4 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, fourth modal half step, which would be the fifth scale degree. So that means I'm going to call this distance an IX modal range and 12, or a 1,5 modal range and 12. And that perfect fifth is going to be in most of the intervals. So let's leave it at that one, and let's go to the next one so that we can keep it rolling. Next one is 20 notes away. So if we go 20 notes away, 20 minus 12 is going to be like we're saying 10 minus 2, 10, 9, 8. So it'd be an 8 note away, which is typically a minor 6. So we know that an 8 note away is usually something found in a minor mode. So we're not going to land on a continent if I start from an Ionian. So let's go to something, even the Dorian is going to be a funny one because that's the different mode for the Dorian. So let's go to the Phrygian mode over here and say we go to 20 note away from the Phrygian node, which is the fifth modal half step away. So let's say we go from the Phrygian here. Can I go 5 modal? Let's start by going the local distance of 5 in modal half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be over here. So the local distance would be a PI modal range, But we want to go 20 distance. So that would be 5, and then across the fault line 10, and then 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So now we're going here. So I would say this would be still a PI and 12 distance, right? Or a modal range of a 3 to a 1 and 12. or a distance of 20 notes away from the Phrygian node, but I'm still going to give me the local modal half step, fifth modal half step, which would be the sixth scale degree. Okay, so so if I measured one that wasn't where it lands me in the ocean, then that's cool. So I can just put my starting point, so it's going to land me in the ocean like the Ionian. So if I was on the Ionian and I go 20 steps up, it's going to land me in the ocean. What's the local distance? It's a 4.5 modal half step. So if I go on the same string, looking at modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4.5. So it's going to be an IX plus, or an I, or a 1 to a 5.5. So it's going to be an IX modal range, IX plus, or 1 to a 5.5. But I want to go 20 up. So it's going to be 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Lands me in the Mixolydian Ocean. So once again, it's still an IX plus, but now it's and 12, or a 1, 5.5 and 12, right? All right, let's do the next one. We go up 21. So if we go up 21, then local distance 21 minus 12 would be like 11 minus 2, and 11 minus 2 would be a 9 note away, which we have to just know would be a major 6 from the normal kind of terminology. And then I would like to know that a 9 note away, that should be the triggering thing. Is that in the Ionian mode? It is. We're going to say a 9 note away is in there, so let's measure it from Ionian, and we should land on a continent. So if I'm on this Ionian, the local distance is 5 modal half steps up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would call that an IA modal range for the local distance, or a 1-6 modal range. But I want to go 21 steps up. So that's going to be 5, 10, and then 15 across the fault line, 15, 20, and then 1. So I could go to here, would be 21 steps up. It's still an IA modal range, but it's going to be IA and 12, or a 1, 6, and 12 modal range. So it's 21 notes up from the Ionian node, and I'm giving the modal half steps as the fifth modal half steps, the local modal half steps. It would be 5 plus 7. We'll talk more about that later, but that's the other way you can kind of name it. But I think the local one would be better, because if it's the fifth modal half step, it would be the sixth scale degree, which might help you to get the idea of it. But again, I think the modal range and the note distance are the things that you want to give you the flavor. All right, let's try that on one where it's going to land me in the ocean. So if I go a local distance of 9 up, or of 9 up, that's going to land me in the ocean if I start on not the Dorian, but another minor mode. So if I'm on the Phrygian, 21 from the Phrygian would be 5.5 modal half steps up. So if I'm on the Phrygian, let's go from this one, and I go 5.5 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, that would be an Indian Ocean. It would be in the Ionian Ocean. So it would be a PI plus, so it would be a PI plus modal range, or a 3.1.5 modal range. But I want to go 21 steps up. So that's going to be 5, 10, 15, and then across the fault line to 20, and 1 lands me in the Ionian Ocean, and I would call that a PI plus and 12, or a 3 to a 1.5 and 12 modal range, 21 notes up, which would have a local distance of 9, 21 minus 12, from the Phrygian node, and would have a local flavor around the track, modal distance of a 5.5, which means it's going to land in the ocean, right? It's a 5.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be a 6.5 scale degree if we used scaled 6.5s in the scale degrees, so it's going to be a 6 scale degree. Okay, let's try another one. All right, so we're going up 22 now. So 22 steps up. Local distance would be 22 minus 12, which would basically be 10. So it's going to be 10. So we're going to say we have a distance of 10, which would normally be a minor 7. Now, if we have a distance of 10, that's the thing that should tell me that it's not usually in like the Ionian, the major scales, the Ionian, but it is in the Mixolydian. So, but it is going to be in the minors, so it's going to be in the Dorian as well. So I should land on a continent if I go up 10 steps from a Dorian. So that also means that I can go 10 plus 12 steps up and land on a continent, and that's 22 steps up from a Dorian. So if I'm on a Dorian, like here, let's go from this one. If I looked at the local distance in modal half steps, 6 of them, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would be on the Ionian. So that would be a DI modal range, local distance DI modal range, or a 2-1 modal range, 2-1 modal range. But I want to go up 22. So can I do that from here? I hope so. It's going to be 5, and then across the fault line 10, and then 15, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Whew, we're still in range. So there's the 22. So this one then is still going to be a DI modal range and 12, or a 2-1 modal range and 12, or a distance of 22, which has a local distance of 10 and has from the Dorian mode, and has a local modal half step of 6th modal half step, which would be the 7th scale degree. All right. What if we did that from what if we did that from one that lands me in the ocean? Like if we did that, if I go 10 steps up from a major, it's going to land me in an ocean somewhere, right? So if I was on like the Ionian, and I go 10 steps up, so if I'm on the Ionian, which would be or 22, 10 plus 12, it's going to land me in the ocean. It's going to be a 5.5. Can I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? It's going to be just after here, and if I imagine the 13th octave lands me in the Aeolian Ocean, right? So that would be an IA plus modal range, or a 1 to a 6.5 modal range, 1 to a 6.5 modal range. But I want to go up 22. So that would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22. Lands me in the Aeolian Ocean. So this is going to be an IA plus and 12, or a 1 to a 6.5 and 12 modal range, a distance of 22 from the Ionian node, or 10 plus an octave, or 10 plus 12 from the Ionian node, which has a local distance of 5.5 modal half steps, which the full distance would be 5.5 plus 7, I believe. We'll talk more about that later. But that would mean that you would think 6.5 would be the scale degrees, but we don't have 0.5s on the scale degrees, therefore it would be 7. All right, let's do one more. I'll say we go 23, and then we go up 2 octaves, but I won't go into that in detail because this. So we go 23 up. Local distance 23 minus 12 would be like 11. It's going to be 11. So we're going to go a distance of 11, which is usually a major 7. So I have to know then the local distance of 11. That's the thing that should tell me that which node I can start from and go 11 up and land in the ocean or not, right? So 11 up, if I go from the Ionian, I'm usually going to land on a continent. So that means that I could go 11 plus 12 or 23 up and still land on a continent. So if I'm on the Ionian, I actually start on this Ionian down here. And if I say I go 6 local modal half steps up, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would get me to the Locrian. So I would call that an IN modal range, or a 1-7 modal range. But of course, I want to go up 23 distance. So let's have a different color here. Let's make this one green. So if I go up from this one and I go up 23, it would be 5, 10, and then 15 across the fault line, 20, 21, 22, 23 to this Locrian. So now this distance is going to be an IN still, but it's going to be an IN and 12 modal range, or a 1-7 and 12 modal range for that one. So the total distance is 23 distance between these two, or it would be 11 and an octave, 11 and 12, or 23 from the Ionian node, but it has a local distance of the 6 modal half steps, which gives me the flavor because that would be the 7th scale degree of it. But again, the main flavor, you want to break down this 23 back to the local distance, which would give you 10. Or you could say, yeah, the 6th from the Ionian is going to give you a 7th scale degree, and we'll give you the flavor. All right, let's do another one that is in this, that will not land us on a continent. So what if I went up 23, but I went from I went up 23, but I'm going up from the Dorian. So that's going to be 23 from the Dorian is going to land us in the ocean. So if I go 23 steps up, why? Because 23 minus the octave is going to give me 11. And I know if I go up 11 distance from a Dorian, it's going to land me in the ocean. So for example, if I'm on this Dorian here, we can see that that's going to give me a 6.5 modal half step forward, lands me in the ocean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. So it's going to be from the Dorian to the I plus ocean. So the Dorian to the I plus ocean, which is going to be the 1 to the 2 to the 1.5, 2 to the 1.5 mode. All right, and so then I'm going to say, all right, but let's do a different color. Let's pick this Dorian here. We're going up 23 from this Dorian. So we're going to go 5, 10, 15 across the fault line, 20, 21, 22, 23. So I get in the Ionian Ocean. So it's still going to a DI modal range, but a DI plus and 12, or a 2, 1 plus, or 2 to a 1.5 and 12 distance. So the distance is 23 or 11 plus an octave from the Dorian mode, which has a local modal half step of 6.5, which would be 7.5 scale degrees if we had those. So you'd think it's going to round down, in this case, to the 7 scale degree if you were using a scale degree term. All right, so obviously this could continue on, so we're going to run long on time, but we could go on infinitely, but at least a few more on the fretboard, but in theory infinitely, right? Because I could go up, oh no, let me get rid of this, and let's just pull this down, because we could keep on going up 2 octaves up. And so that would be 24, and I could repeat this process, although it's going to get messy on the fretboard going past like 30 distance-wise. So on a fretboard, you're typically going to have distances that could go up, a little over an octave and a half, basically, is what you're usually kind of thinking when you're measuring distances, unless you're on a longer fretboard and you're tapping and stuff like that instead of reaching with one hand or doing something kind of unusual. But in theory, of course, it goes on forever. Now, obviously, it also goes in the negative direction, and we also saw that going in the negative direction already caused us problems with the intervals. So what if I go in the negative direction and I go over an octave in the negative or counterclockwise direction? So obviously, that's another place where this system is going to make it is actually a lot easier to use, because it works, because going negative is already where the current system scale degrees fall apart. So it's going to fall apart further once you start building on a foundation that already has flaws in it, right? So that's why this would be more solid.